Turning to our top story now, and that is Blockade Australia vowing to disrupt Sydney in some form or another again today for a second straight day. So joining me live to discuss this is our panel this morning, the Liberal Senator Hollie Hughes, as well as Labor MP Matt Thistlethwaite, coming to us live from Canberra. Now, it's a good topic to discuss because you're both Sydney-siders. Good morning to you. We'll start with you, Hollie, first of all here, because you're here in the studio. What are your thoughts on Blockade Australia and what they're doing?
I think it's completely irresponsible and disruptive, and absolutely the book should be thrown at them. The behaviour yesterday, I mean, it was almost laughable when you saw the girl that put a bike chain around her neck and chained herself to the steering wheel of her car in the Harbour Tunnel to then drink from a non-reusable water bottle. And I'm pretty sure she wasn't driving an EV. So the hypocrisy is alive and well with these people. But the disruption that they're causing to Sydney-siders, this is the biggest city in the country, and yet it comes to a standstill through this irresponsible behaviour.
Matt, what do you think of this, and what do you make of the claims by Blockade Australia that not enough has been done when it comes to the climate, and not enough is continuing to be done when it comes to perhaps a new government, even though you haven't been in the government for very long?
Well, I don't support these sort of actions from these climate protesters. I think that they actually do themselves a disservice and that they turn the public off their cause, and the actions that we saw yesterday are completely unjustified. Blocking a tunnel, a major tunnel in a Sydney road network, is completely unjustified and idiotic in my view. You just turn people off, and when people are trying to get to work, get their kids to school, actions like that don't do their cause any good. And the New South Wales government, with the support of the Labor Party in the state parliament, recently lifted the fines, including jail terms for actions like that. And I've got no doubt that you're going to see these protesters prosecuted for those actions in the coming days.
Yeah, these protesters have been linked with the Greens, and Hollie, you've got yourself into a little hot water, shall we say, in the past couple of days. Hot water by some people who say that anyway, because you're quoted as saying this all starts in the schools. The education system is run by Marxists. When kids leave school, that's where they land. Would you elaborate on that?
Well, it turns out Marxists don't like being called Marxists, apparently, but we do know that in the education department there is a very strong left-wing bent, and anyone that denies that either doesn't have kids at school or aren't seeing what's happening, even with the curriculum. The curriculum is moving so far to the left these days. We know that it's all John Keynes, if not Marxism, rather than Adam Smith.
Are you referring to climate there, or is it across the board?
It's across the board. We know there's a left-wing bent across all of the political correctness. We're seeing texts that are being removed. Kids aren't learning about certain books anymore because whomever wrote them was in a time completely different to what we live in now. We're seeing as an almost woke agenda being put onto all sorts of curriculum now. So I think the left wing is across a lot of what we see through the school system nowadays, but certainly the climate change stuff. And we're seeing kids are coming out now with climate change anxiety. I mean, because they're being told of these catastrophic impacts that are about to occur on their lives, or their futures are doomed because we mine coal still. It's absolutely irresponsible. It's dangerous for children to being told these messages. But yes, it is certainly landing a lot of them voting Greens when they leave school.
OK, Matt, your colleague and the Education Minister, Jason Clare, he was critical of Hollie's comments a couple of days ago, said it was crazy talk. What are your thoughts on it?
Go for your life,
well,
Matt.
They're ridiculous comments, Hollie. There's absolutely no evidence of that at all. I see from the teachers that are teaching my kids and doing a great job in the community that I represent, that they work very, very hard. Many of them put in long hours doing research and their own activities on weekends and into the evening to ensure that their kids that they're teaching get a better education. And I think that we should be congratulating our teachers for the wonderful job that they do. And I think that you and your party haven't learnt the lesson from the election, and that is that Australians do want stronger action on climate change. They want greater integrity in politics, and women want more rights in society. And blaming teachers for Australians moving that way and voting that way in the election, I think, just demonstrates how out of touch you and your party are, and the fact that you're in denial about the election results.
Is that a
Matt,
fair
thanks
enough?
for explaining to me what women want. I really love it when men tell me what women want. It's great.
But does Matt have a point there? I mean, you did lose the election quite considerably, and so is that a big factor in it, that this is a topic that a lot of people want?
A lot of people like to talk about climate change. They say it's very, very important to them, but a lot of people don't want to pay for it either. And they want to make sure they can turn their dishwashers on after 6 o'clock at night. They want to be able to turn their lights on. What people don't seem to understand, and I'm a fan of renewables, if we could have renewables and a cleaner environment and everything was hunky-dory and everything could work, we could have affordable, reliable baseload power through a renewable system, that'd be great. But the technology just doesn't exist, and no one is being honest and upfront about that. The battery storage does not exist at this stage. Technology will catch up, but it is not there at the moment. You can't charge an electric vehicle overnight using solar panels because a battery goes out within 2 hours and then requires fossil fuels to recharge. No one's prepared to have the true conversation.
A quick one here, because there's another topic I want to get to, but nuclear, do you?
Absolutely, I support nuclear.
What about you, Matt? Do you want to go down that road?
It's not the Labor Party's policy to support nuclear energy. It's more costly to generate electricity through that means. You're talking about at least 10 years.
We're talking about small modular nuclear, Matt. We're not talking about a big old Chernobyl-style nuclear power station.
And the question that Hollie and others won't ask is, where does it go? Where is it going to go? Whose electorate is it going to go in? John Howard, when he was Prime Minister, had a look at this, and when he was questioned about whose electorate and whose community it was going to go in, they quickly backed off from it.
Again, so no one's talking about a nuclear power station.
Option for Australia to be looking at. What we should be looking at, and what the government should have been doing over the last decade, is planning a sensible and gradual transition to renewable energy. And we would have potentially avoided some of the catastrophic consequences that we've had in our energy market with the crisis over recent years if we had that sensible transition to renewables that was stopped by the former government when they got elected. And Australia was in no man's land around investment certainty for generation, and we're paying the price for it now.
But what about, we'll close at this point here, but what about that point that Hollie just mentioned there, Matt? I mean, you don't have to have these huge reactors, Chernobyl-style reactors, as you put it there too. The technology has evolved since then, and you've got smaller options that are available and can be built a lot faster. Would that not work?
But it's still a more expensive form of energy compared to solar and wind, particularly offshore wind, which we've now approved in Australia.
Solar and wind aren't connected to the grid.
We should be able to manage this transition without having to look at nuclear energy, which, when you look at it, is going to take at least 5 to 10 years to get approval for some of even those smaller reactors to get up and running in particular communities. It's much more sensible to look to transition to renewables as quickly as possible, as gradually as possible. That's what the rest of the world is doing. Surely Australia is capable of doing the same.
Not France, 70% nuclear in France.
We are out of time, unfortunately, guys, but I enjoyed that. Unfortunately, I didn't get to a few other topics that I wanted to get to, but we'll save those for next time. Matt Thistlethwaite and Hollie Hughes, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Pete. Have a great day, Matt.
Thanks, Pete.